Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. I've been using it for a couple weeks, and I thought we'd go over what it's like to use, some good things about it, a couple bad things about it, and whether or not maybe you should upgrade from an S24 to an S25 or maybe another phone. Now the first thing is the design changed a little bit this year. They've squared it off a little bit more, it doesn't roll over to the edges, and the overall corners are a little bit different, and it feels a little bit lighter overall. It comes in at 219 grams or 7.72 ounces. It feels very good to hold just because it's squared off, so it makes it a little bit easier, but it's not as elegant as maybe what we had before. They've improved the glass this time around with Gorilla Glass Armor 2, so it should be more resistant to cracking and scratching. And the display also gets a little bit larger, so not only did the design change slightly, but the display is now 6.9 inches thanks to this shrunken bezel. They've sort of expanded the display out, and it feels a little bit narrower than last year's phone because of it. Because it's not as rounded and it's more squared off, it feels a little bit different. Of course, design-wise, it's pretty much the same. We have our power sleep wake button, our volume rocker. On the top, we've got a couple microphones. On the left-hand side, basically just a millimeter wave antenna. And then on the bottom, of course, we have our USB-C, our SIM card tray, a microphone, a speaker, and our S Pen. The S Pen does not include Bluetooth this year, but it has all the same functionality except for the remote control options, which Samsung said only 1% of people used. Now, apparently the coils are still inside here to allow it to charge, but the previous S Pen doesn't fit in here. Samsung, I thought, was going to originally make it available if you wanted to purchase that version, but it looks like that's not the case. So you won't have those functions if you're used to those, but most people aren't using them anyway. So if that's a deal breaker for you, well, that's going to be a little bit of a pain. Other than that, though, it's basically the same functionality, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later. The 6.9-inch display still has the anti-reflective display on it, which is great compared to some other phones that are much more glossy in the same sort of condition. For example, here's the iPhone 16 Plus, and you can see the overall reflections. So definitely much better in overall sunlight. We're outside, and of course the display is just as bright as it was last year and very easy to see. We're all the way up at max brightness, but it is a sunny day here with zero cloud cover. Now we do have the Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite processor in here, and that's super fast and super smooth all the time. If you're just scrolling through things, of course, it's going to be nice and smooth, and the overall experience is nice and fast. Opening a camera, maybe going into, well, we could go into Pocket Casts. Load this. I haven't loaded it at all, but you'll see it loaded nice and fast. The overall scrolling is smooth, and maybe going into a game should be nice and fast as well. So if we go into a casual game such as Pocket City, that's not going to put a whole lot of strain on it, but Real Racing 3, you'll see I can resume here, is just incredibly smooth. Now, if you do play this for about maybe 30 minutes or so, you may notice that it might slow down in frame rate a little bit and maybe get a little bit warm. But I actually compared this to the 16 Pro Max and found this to look better and be smoother overall while using it. It does heat up a little bit when you're doing intensive tasks, but they've improved the vapor chamber this year by 40%. So they've made it 40% larger. They showed us in a display at the preview at the Samsung Unpacked event that you can see here, and it seems to cool it down nicely. It does get a little bit warm, but that's expected for any processor, but it does dissipate heat pretty well. When it comes to benchmarks, well, those are very impressive this year as they're finally getting a little bit better than the iPhone. So if we go into Geekbench 6, you'll see this is when I ran it before, 3,059 for single core, 9,607 for multi-core. This score with multi-core is higher than what we have on the 16 Pro Max. The single core is slightly lower, so not a big deal there. It's super fast all the time. I've really had no issues with it. I've seen some people rapidly opening applications and having them go back and forth like this. This is not a good indication of overall speed as there's a lot going on in the background. But you can see there might be a slight lag if you're doing that, going from maybe Chrome back to the camera. But overall, it's not really an issue. If you're just using it normally, going into notes, going back out, going into the camera, it's going to seem super smooth all the time. Now, we still have the 5,000 milliamp hour battery that we had last year. They haven't improved that at all. However, due to the new processor, we get about an extra hour of battery usage. In battery tests, it seems that it's getting through the day for me, no problem whatsoever, and standby is quite good as well. You'll see I'm currently at 74%, and it's been off power for a while. If we go into settings, go down to battery, and you'll see 3 days, 2 hours left, 74% available, and a full charge will last about 4 days. Now that's if you're hardly using it, but you'll see here that it's been charged 9 hours ago, used some, and then not used for a little while, and standby is generally very, very good. But I find that this gets me through the day with about 50% of my battery life left, sometimes a little bit more, compared to maybe 40% on an iPhone 16 Pro Max, for example. So standby is great if you're just leaving it, turning off the display, walking away. It seems to actually barely lose any power, which is always great, and the fingerprint sensor is nice and fast as well. With OneUI 7, they've made a couple nice changes with the overall charging animation. So once you plug this in, you can see the animation at the bottom. It just looks really nice, and it actually tells you how much time there is until it's finished charging. It's something we don't get on other phones, such as iPhones, so that's something that I really appreciate with it. With the cameras this year, we do gain a slight change visually with this ring around the outside edge, and some have criticized this, saying it's more decorative than anything else, but I also find it to be functional as it's raised up ever so slightly and helps you lay it on the table and not bump into the lens itself. It is slightly raised from the back of the phone, but it does act as a protective barrier against maybe touching something on the lens itself. We have an upgraded ultra-wide camera lens as well, or sensor, with 50 megapixels and a 4-time macro improvement because of that. The biggest upgrade, though, has to do with video modes. If we go into the camera itself, we'll go into video, maybe we'll go to more and pro video. We now have additional tools such as false color to help with exposure. So if you want to use that as a tool, you can. We have a bunch of different options here. Maybe you want to use zebras, you can, or turn it off altogether. We also have log modes, so if you want to use log, you can see that in the upper left. If you want to use that and add your own LUT, give it a look that you appreciate, you have that option here now too. So we have all of that along with a bunch of different recording modes and improved things such as portrait mode. And in fact, I'm recording this video on an S25 Plus. So you can see that here, fully recorded on the S25 Plus. Now at the time of recording this, I don't know if I'm using the audio from this, but I'll mention that in the video, or from a DJI mic, but either way, this shows you what it looks like throughout the entire video. So some great overall video options here. I think it looks as good as anything else I've used at this point, and I could easily swap between this and an iPhone or a regular camera, and I think most people wouldn't even recognize that. There's a lot of AI software changes as well. If we go into video, maybe we'll just go back to regular video, spin this around, and now we'll just start recording. We'll continue to record for just a moment, and you'll see that I'm just recording the background. We'll stop it, and if we go into the video file itself, go to our options to edit it, we now have the options for audio, and within audio, we have audio eraser. It will recognize what's in the background and allow you to analyze the sound and then remove whatever noise is in the background. So if you have maybe waves in the background or a plane flying overhead, you can adjust it or even set it to auto, and it will eliminate that entirely. It does a great job and lets you completely optimize it however you'd like, along with a lot of other tools built in. Now, there's a lot of things with OneUI. There's a now brief. So we also have this brief here, but we have a now brief if you're on the lock screen. You've got your midday brief, and if you have anything else here, so if maybe we start some music. Now I'm playing music. If I turn the screen back on, you can see it down at the bottom, and I can swipe through my midday brief, or maybe control the music altogether, or go into it and it comes up and shows me what album I'm playing. And again, we can go back out if we'd like to and swap between whatever we'd like. So that's a really nice option here. We can also swipe back. Let's go back and unpause that. There we go, or pause that. And it works really well. Now, the brief in the middle is something we get throughout the day. And I thought it was going to be great, and it will learn over time. But if we go into it, you'll see it says midday brief. It gives me the weather and then gives me some random piece of news. I haven't even really looked at the news on this phone, and it just changes it all the time. And it seems to be something that's not very relevant to what I'm looking at. I typically look at tech news only, and so it's showing me political news, and hopefully that updates over time. Notifications are slightly different in that we have a notification here, and then if we swipe down on the right side, we've got our options here, such as do not disturb and everything else, or swipe down on the left for notifications. So that's something that's been updated in OneUI 7. And also, I think the biggest upgrade is probably what Gemini can do. It can see what's on the screen, give you information, or even go search videos for information. So find the best S25 Ultra videos on YouTube and then summarize them and put them in notes. It takes a second to do this. It connects to YouTube and then summarizes them based on the videos that it sees. and it puts them in your Notes app of your choice. So it asks you when you first do this, do you want to use maybe Samsung Notes or Google Keep? And it says YouTube and one more, and then gives you all of the information about it and different options as far as videos. So those are some options out there, and you can do that with just about anything to summarize different things you're looking for, whether it's in YouTube, online, or elsewhere. If you're on a website and playing music, you can use Circle to Search to actually recognize music now. And if we go into YouTube, go to one of my videos, here's my S25 Ultra versus 16 Pro Max video. And if we bring in the sidebar here, go to AI Select, we can then select this here so we can draw around it, and then we can create a GIF or GIF. So maybe we'll go to the three-dot menu, create a GIF, or GIF as many people say. We'll hit record. Now it's recording it, and you can do this with just about any video. Hit stop, and then it creates that for you and then loops it. So you can use it for that. You can also use it for any notes you want and lots of different options. So I think this is something that's really helpful that I use more than I would use on other devices. We also have the option, and I showed this in my unboxing video and more, but if you use the camera on here with Gemini, so if we press and hold, we can go to the plus button in the bottom left, go to camera, and we can identify something. So maybe I'll take a photo here. We'll add that image to the prompt. We'll tap attach, and then we could say something such as, we'll go to the microphone. What could I do with this landscape here? And it will figure that out for me. It looks like you have a lovely natural woodland landscape, and then it gives me some suggestions. You can do this with things that are maybe in your pantry or your refrigerator and say, what recipes can I use based off of what we have in our pantry? It works incredibly well, and one thing we've been seeing online quite a bit lately has to do with photos. The generative AI in removing things with Magic Eraser is incredibly impressive. If we go into Photos, now while it's Samsung Unpacked, this is a photo I took at Google, and you'll see the two little androids here. If we go into our Magic Editor, we'll discard any changes we've made, and now we can actually use the S Pen or our finger, but the S Pen will make it a little bit easier. Let's get rid of this android. It recognizes it immediately. We'll tap Erase. It generates what's in the background and then erases that. We've seen some very impressive things on X or Twitter with people doing this, and you can see it filled in the background, and you can't really tell there's any difference. You can see the angles of the roof are correct on the Google building, and it just looks incredibly impressive, and it's completely removed. You would never know it's there. If we swipe over, you'll see we're done with that. We could do the same with the other one. So again, we could change the sky or anything else. So we'll save a copy, and we can do that with just about any photo, and it's improved this year. So we've had this before, but they've improved it, so it's unbelievable while you're using it. Now, anything else? Really, that's about it with this particular update. S25 Ultra, of course, is going to get updates for 7 years, according to Samsung. So about 4 or 5 years of regular feature updates and a few years of security updates, but most people upgrade by then. The only negative things I have to say about the phone this year is that it's not that huge of a design change. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as many people really appreciate this phone, and it's come to be sort of a signature of Samsung to have this 3-row camera design with the 2 on the side. So based off of that, of course, it's going to be recognizable. However, I don't know that it's a big enough justification to jump up to this phone, and it's something that I really like. The phone is very consistent, but again, it's starting to look a little bit older, just like iPhones are and other phones that keep the same design for multiple years. So since it's been around for about 4 years at this point, it's a very familiar design. It's not a bad thing, but it's definitely something that we're going to see more differentiation between the software more than anything else as the phones reach maturity. The only other negative really has to do with the S Pen. Taking out the Bluetooth, maybe to save a few pennies or whatever in manufacturing cost, is something that I don't think was necessary, and just to have that feature removed is something I think those that really use that feature for maybe taking remote photos and video would really appreciate still having. So other than that, I think those are the major negatives. Everything else is pretty great. The screen is great. The overall build is great, and I like that they bumped up the quality of the glass. We still have the display that is nice to see in bright, shiny environments and not reflective, and they've done a great job here. But other than that, there's not a whole lot more negative to say about it. But whether or not you should buy an S25 Ultra really depends on a few things, as many of these software options will be coming to older devices as well, as that's something that's great that Samsung does. So if you have an S24 Ultra, I don't know that I would upgrade for this. I think it's a good enough phone, and if you're happy with it and your battery health is great, I would probably stick with the S24 Ultra for another year. However, if you have an S23 or maybe an older iPhone or maybe an older Pixel or something else, I think you'd be very happy with this device. It always seems to be pretty fast, going back and forth as I showed. It is a slight delay going into the browser like that, but most of the time it's incredibly fast, and I've had no issues whatsoever with it. It's been the most stable phone I've used in a little while, more stable than an iPhone. Pixel's about the same for me right now, but in general, I'm very impressed with it, and it feels fast and smooth and fluid all the time. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is the overall connectivity. I actually find that I have better signal with this phone than I have on an iPhone. Now, some of that is subjective as they can change some of the signal levels, but if we take a look at my iPhone that's sitting right here, you'll see in the upper right, there's the iPhone 2 bars, both on T-Mobile, and 4 bars on the S25 Ultra. So we've actually got more signal in the same exact location on the same exact carrier. So I don't know if that's just because it's got a better modem, or it's just that they bumped the overall signal strengths up differently based on the actual send and receive information. But overall, I think it's very good. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. I've used the camera in comparisons. I'm using the S25 camera right now, the S25 Plus, and I think it's very impressive for what it is. Let me know what you think of the S25 Ultra. Did you upgrade to it? I'll put some links in the description if you want to pick one up yourself with maybe some of the deals from Samsung. And also, if you've been using one, what's your experience been like? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Of course, I'll link the latest wallpapers in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.